5 terrifying Uber horror stories.
1. Nowhere fast. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I summoned an Uber to take me home after a long day at work. The app displayed a Black Sedan as my ride, and its estimated arrival time was just 2 minutes. Perfect, I thought. The car pulled up, and I quickly hopped into the back seat, greeted by the soft glow of the dashboard. The driver, a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and a cold demeanor, offered a curt nod in acknowledgement. I gave him my address and settled back, eager to relax during the short journey home. As we drove through the dimly lit streets, an uneasy silence enveloped the car. The driver didn't make small talk, and I sensed something off about him. My heart raced as I noticed he was taking unfamiliar routes, seemingly avoiding main roads. I nervously glanced at the GPS, which showed an entirely different path from my usual commute. "Hey, why are we going this way?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The driver's eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror, and a sinister grin crept across his face. "Shortcut," he replied, his voice dripping with menace. And he's turned to fear as we ventured deeper into unfamiliar territory. The surroundings grew darker, and my phone signal weakened, rendering my attempts to call for help futile. Panic set in when I noticed we were heading toward an isolated, overgrown forest. "Stop the car," I demanded, my voice trembling. The driver remained silent, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. I could see his face more clearly now, twisted with malice. The car came to a halt, and my heart pounded like a drum. I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. My desperate attempts to escape were in vain. The driver turned to me, revealing a glint of a knife in his hand. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. Terror surged through my veins as I realized the dire situation I was in. I had to think quickly. In one desperate move, I grabbed my bag and swung it at the driver's face, disorienting him momentarily. I pushed against the door with all my strength, and this time it gave way. I tumbled out of the car, landing on the rough forest floor. I didn't look back. I just ran. The sound of footsteps pursuing me echoed through the woods, but I didn't dare glance behind. My only goal was to reach civilization and get help. Branches scratched my skin and thorns tore at my clothes, but I pressed on. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled onto a main road, gasping for breath. A passing car stopped, and I frantically explained my ordeal to the driver, who called the police. They arrived swiftly, and a search for the sinister Uber driver commenced. Though they never found him, the trauma of that night still haunts me. I'll never forget the terrifying Uber trip gone wrong, a night when a ride-sharing service became a nightmare. It's a chilling reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, and we must always trust our instincts to protect ourselves from the darkness that hides in plain sight. 2. I was drunk. As the clock neared midnight, I reluctantly hailed an Uber after a late-night office party. Tired and slightly tipsy, I was relieved when a car pulled up, its illuminated Uber logo confirming my ride had arrived. I staggered towards a sleek sedan and climbed into the back seat, greeted by a friendly-looking driver. "Good evening," I slurred, giving him my home address. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, replied in a polite tone. We exchanged pleasantries, and the journey began smoothly. But as we left the well-lit downtown area behind, unease crept in. The driver, whom I now noticed had a peculiar glint in his eyes, started taking an unusual route away from the main roads. My alcohol-fueled sense of caution gave way to concern. "Hey, isn't this the wrong way?" I asked, my words slurred. The driver's smile faded into a sinister smirk as he replied, "Just a shortcut, don't worry." My stomach churned with anxiety. I pulled out my phone to check the GPS, but it showed a map filled with unfamiliar streets. Panic surged as I realized we were heading toward a desolate industrial area, far from any signs of civilization. "Stop the car," I demanded, my voice more assertive now. The driver remained eerily silent, and the car continued to accelerate. Fear gnawed at my insides as I realized the door locks were engaged. I fumbled with my phone. trying to call 911, but the signal was weak and the call wouldn't connect. I needed to act quickly. I noticed a heavy wrench on the floor, likely left behind by a previous passenger. I reached for it, gripping it tightly as I weighed my options. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged at the driver, swinging the wrench towards him. It connected with his arm, causing him to yelp in pain and lose control of the car. The vehicle veered off the road, crashing into a chain-link fence. The impact jolted me, but I managed to unlock the door and scramble out. My heart raced as I sprinted away from the wrecked car, the sound of the driver's furious curses and footsteps pursuing me. I had no idea where I was, but my only goal was to get help. I stumbled upon an abandoned warehouse, its door ajar. With no other option, I slipped inside and hid in the shadows, praying that the driver wouldn't find me. My phone finally connected to 911 and I explained my terrifying situation. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, my breaths shallow and labored. The distant sound of sirens grew closer and I knew help was on the way. The police arrived swiftly, apprehending the driver who had attempted to kidnap me. As they led him away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but shiver, haunted by the close call. That night, I learned that danger could lurk behind the facade of a simple Uber ride, and it was a chilling reminder that we must always trust our instincts and be prepared to defend ourselves when confronted by the darkness that can hide in plain sight. Free. Drunk driving at night. The city's nightlife pulsed with energy, and I found myself at a crowded bar, celebrating a friend's birthday. Laughter and music filled the air, and as the clock struck midnight, I realized I had lost track of time. I needed to get home, so I summoned an Uber. Minutes later, a car pulled up, and I stumbled into the back seat. The driver, a middle-aged man with bloodshot eyes and the heavy scent of alcohol on his breath, gave me a slurred greeting as he swayed in his seat. Red flags went off in my mind, but I was too tired to think straight. "Take me to Elm Street," I mumbled, trusting the app to guide us. The car lurched forward, and I glanced at the driver. His eyes were half-closed, and he seemed disoriented. Panic welled up inside me as I realized I was in a car with a drunk driver. "Hey, are you okay to drive?" I asked, my voice quivering. The driver let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, don't worry about it." But I couldn't ignore the erratic way he was handling the car. Swerving between lanes and missing stop signs, we were a ticking time bomb on the road. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling as I considered calling 911, but I hesitated. What if I was overreacting? And then I knew I wasn't overreacting. The driver was steering the car all over the street, passing over the yellow line multiple times and then coming back and bumping into the sidewalk curb. In the back seat, I held on for dear life, clutching the door handle, and the other hand held onto the back of the seat in front of me. This went on for a terrifying few minutes that felt like hours. Just as I contemplated my next move, a police car pulled up behind us, lights flashing. Relief washed over me as they signaled for the Uber driver to pull over. The driver complied, his face pale as he struggled to find the vehicle's registration. Two officers approached the car, their stern expressions mirrored by my own anxiety. The driver rolled down his window and a pungent wave of alcohol spilled out. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the scene unfold. The officers asked the driver to step out of the car, and as he did, he stumbled and nearly fell to the ground. Field sobriety tests were administered, and it was clear he was well beyond the legal limit. They handcuffed him and read him his rights. As they led him away, I couldn't help but think of how close I had come to a potentially deadly situation. My mind raced with what-ifs, and I shuddered at the thought of what might have happened if the police hadn't intervened. A sober Uber driver arrived shortly after to take me home, and the rest of the ride was uneventful. But that night served as a stark reminder that dangers can lurk in the most unexpected places, even within the confines of a seemingly ordinary Uber ride. It was a chilling experience that would forever make me vigilant about my safety when using ride-sharing services. 4. The Black Sedan. The night was cold and drizzly as I waited on a dimly lit street corner, desperately trying to summon an Uber after a late work shift. My breath formed misty clouds in a frigid air, and I silently prayed for the car to arrive quickly. Finally, a black sedan pulled up, and I eagerly climbed into the back seat. grateful to escape the cold. The driver, a middle-aged man with a grizzled beard and a vacant expression, acknowledged me with a brief nod. I gave him my destination, and we started our journey. The initial moments of the ride were quiet, but a growing unease settled in as the driver took an unfamiliar route, straying from the main roads. I watched the GPS map on my phone, which displayed a circuitous path, far from the usual route home. "Hey, why are we going this way?" I inquired, my voice trembling slightly. The driver didn't respond, and his silence only intensified my anxiety. As we veered deeper into an isolated, poorly lit area, panic started to rise within me. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and I realized that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the car slowed to a stop, the engine idling. The driver turned to me, and a malevolent grin crept across his face. His hand disappeared beneath the seat, and when it re-emerged, it held a gleaming knife, its blade catching the faint glow from the dashboard. "Give me your wallet and phone," he demanded, his voice low and menacing. My heart pounded like a jackhammer as the gravity of the situation sank in. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to think fast. I pretended to reach for my wallet, but instead, I grabbed my backpack, which sat beside me. In one swift motion, I swung it at the driver, catching him off guard. The bag struck his arm, and the knife clattered to the floor. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I didn't waste a second. I flung open the door and bolted out of the car, running into the desolate street. I could hear the driver cursing and chasing after me, but I didn't dare look back. I sprinted until I reached a gas station a few blocks away, where I pleaded with the attendants to call the police. They did so immediately, and within minutes, sirens blared in the distance. Officers arrived and apprehended the would-be robber, who had abandoned his car in his haste to escape. Shaken and traumatized, I gave my statement to the police. The realization of how close I had come to a potentially fatal encounter left me trembling. It was a harrowing experience that would forever haunt my memory, a stark reminder that even the most routine of situations could take a terrifying turn in the blink of an eye. After the whole experience, I got a chance to think about what actually happened that night. And something occurred to me that I didn't think of before. The car that I had gotten into did not have an Uber sticker on it. The man didn't even have his phone out for a GPS. I had just gotten into some man's car thinking was an Uber. 5. A man of good taste. It was a chilly autumn evening when I found myself summoning an Uber after a late-night movie. The city streets were mostly deserted, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I watched as the car icon on my phone's screen drew closer, indicating my ride's arrival. A black sedan pulled up, and I climbed into the back seat. The driver, a man in his late 40s with unkempt hair and a disheveled appearance, greeted me with an unsettling smile. His eyes, hidden behind a pair of round glasses, held an eerie intensity. "Good evening," he murmured, his voice dripping with an unsettling sweetness. I gave him my address, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. As we drove away from the well-lit movie theater, the silence in the car grew heavy. The driver didn't glance at me through the rearview mirror, but I could sense his gaze on me, making my skin crawl. Unsure of how to break the silence, I asked, "How long have you been an Uber driver?" He turned his head slightly, his unsettling smile never wavering. "Oh, I've been driving for a while. I've met all sorts of people." His response sent shivers down my spine. I glanced out the window, hoping to find comfort in the passing cityscape, but it was then that I noticed he was taking an unfamiliar route, veering away from well-lit streets and into a dimly lit residential area. "Excuse me," I stammered, my voice quaking. "I think you missed a turn." The driver's gaze lingered on me in the rearview mirror. "Don't worry," he replied, his voice syrupy. "I know a shortcut. It's much faster." My heart raced as we delved further into the quiet, unfamiliar neighborhood. Panic washed over me, and I began to send discreet messages to a friend, detailing my location and expressing my growing concern. Suddenly, the driver's tone shifted, becoming more sinister. "You're a very attractive passenger," he said, his eyes narrowing as he focused on me. Fear gripped me, and I knew I had to get out of that car. I feigned sudden illness, telling the driver I felt nauseous and needed to pull over. He reluctantly pulled to the side of the road, and I wasted no time opening the door and fleeing from the car. I ran to the nearest house, pounding on the door and begging for help. The homeowner, alarmed by my distress, called the police. They arrived promptly, and I recounted my terrifying experience to them. The driver was located and questioned by the authorities. There wasn't sufficient evidence to charge him with a crime. Nonetheless, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that had engulfed me during that Uber ride. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the real horror can be found in the most unexpected places, lurking behind a friendly facade, and that trusting one's instincts can mean the difference between safety and peril. Which story caught your attention the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Check out my website in the description below to see what I'm writing. And just below there's some suggestions related to what we talked about today. Peace.